Looks like Member Thomas is joining us, and I think with that, we have a quorum. Do we have everybody from staff that we're expecting today, John?
Yeah, it's just me tonight.
Okay. With that said, I will call this meeting to order, and I'll start with the land acknowledgement statement. So the City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lisjan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which has transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. I'm going to move to roll call.
Okay. Member Chomsky?
Present.
Member Hoff? Absent. Member Schneider?
Present.
Member Thomas?
Present.
And Chair Bowman?
Present. All right. First item on our agenda is the approval of minutes from September 15th.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Member Chomsky?
Yes.
Member Hoff? Absent. Schneider?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
And Chair Bowman?
Yes. All right. Next item is any announcements from staff or committee members? Any announcements from staff?
Yeah, there is one. Just that the Charter Review Committee Work Plan Update Report was reviewed at the City Council meeting, their November 7th meeting.
So I can add some color to that since I was in attendance. I can say that I think all the updates were reviewed in full, but not in detail during the meeting. I think the only committee or commission that was asked to comment was the Social, Economic, and Justice Committee. But there was commentary from the council members as to whether they should think about revising the number of commissions and committees that exist in the city. I think just benchmarking compared to other cities and towns. Albany tends to be on the high end, and then there was an especially high amount of turnover this year.
I'm on a call.
The council members expressed some gratitude and appreciation of the work that we've done, like good work specifically from the Charter Review Committee, at least in terms of what was in the updates. And Mayor Jordan specifically suggested that he was looking forward to seeing the final output. That being said, I think one or two of the council members suggested that maybe in the following year, this committee this committee might want to consider being an ad hoc committee at the discretion of the city council. I think that's up for consideration. I'm not sure exactly what that entails. Maybe we identified a specific issue. Now we asked the Charter Review Committee to look into it. And then there were some other commissions and committees that they suggested they may review prior to the start of the next council, or maybe after the start of the next council, whether or not they should continue in their current form. I think some overlap with, I think it's the Policing Commission and the Social, Economic, and Justice Commission was one example that was raised. So things like that. But no, it doesn't sound like any decision was made. Any questions or clarifications?
I guess my one question is this the last meeting of our committee in its current form, or do we have another meeting in January before the next round of appointments takes place?
Assumedly, there will be a January meeting.
So this group of appointees will meet in January, regardless of what happens with the next term.
Well, council didn't reach any action regarding this committee, so the assumption is that there will be a January meeting.
There will be a January meeting with this group, and then will there be a March meeting?
By that point, I think it's the next term of committee members.
Okay, so when we're thinking about creating final recommendations or the memo to carry on to the next committee, whether it's ad hoc or a permanent committee, we should be wrapping that up definitively by January.
Assumedly, yes.
Okay. Got it. Any other questions?
Just to clarify on that, it wouldn't necessarily be the same members
Oh,
for the January meeting.
It wouldn't necessarily be the same members for the January meeting. So this could, in fact, be our final meeting.
Possibly, yes.
Okay.
Okay. So does that, I mean, when we accepted our appointment, was it for a term that ended after tonight, or was it for a term that ends after January's meeting, or was that unspecified?
So in December, the clerk will put up notice of vacancies, after which council members will have, after 10 business days after that's been posted, council members can possibly appoint new members or same members if you guys reapply. So it's dependent upon whether or not council members appoint new members before the January meeting.
So if we don't reapply, then we may or may not be called to join the January meeting, depending on how our appointing council member chooses to handle it. Is that?
That sounds correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a little confused myself because when I was putting together the work plan memo on the voting age issue, I noted in our work plan, it actually suggests the term runs through June 30th, 2023. But yeah, that's what confused me, given that I think we've assumed that this could be our final meeting. But let us know if there's any clarification there.
I just had a question. Has everyone, the other members, is this your 2-year mark? I would have thought there would be a staggered, kind of like the city council.
So we started in April, and that's where my confusion stems a bit from.
I see.
So I think the question on the table is just that should we consider this our last meeting, or in January, or will we be meeting as this group again?
Okay.
But yes, it's been approximately 2 years for most of, or at least several of the members of this appointed group. And yeah, I was going to say something else, but I've lost it. Yes, it was April of 2021 that we started. So our 2-year term is coming to a close. Oh, and it is it's like the House of Representatives here. We all have, if we want to continue, we all have to reapply every 2 years.
Okay.
Okay. If there's no other announcements, I say we have some members of the public, including, it looks like, one of our city council members. So they might be able to clarify. But I can go ahead and open it up to see if we have any public comment.
Yes, there's one. Okay, you're on.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I will not, it's not appropriate for me to respond to your question. That's not why I'm here. But I am here to actually, for those of you that don't know, I'm Peggy McQuaid. And as I wind down my term on the City Council, I want to take a minute of your time to personally thank each one of you for your service to our community. I know it's not always easy or it's not always convenient to attend a monthly meeting or to do the work necessary to prepare for these meetings. Meeting on Zoom for over 2 years has impacted all of us in ways both known and unknown, and I'm grateful for your perseverance and patience during this time. The Charter Review Committee has a unique role in advising the City Council of any changes that are needed to make the Charter, which was adopted in 1927, a modern and functional document. Sometimes the work you do is simple house cleaning, such as eliminating specific charges for making copies, but other times your work impacts the very structure of the city. It was through a charter change the police chief and the city attorney ceased to be elected positions. It was a charter change that highlighted the importance of gender-neutral language in all of our documents. Recently, the council turned to the charter for guidance in writing the ordinance for filling the vacant city council seat. Any charter change requires a vote of the citizens. These changes require thoughtful deliberation. I've been extremely impressed by the research you have presented and the deliberations you have held over the past 2 years on complex issues. Your determination not to rush any decision will serve the city well over time. You are an advisory body which is somewhat hidden from Albany. You don't meet every month, but I want you to know how appreciated you are. Thank you again for the work you've put into the Charter Review Committee, and I wish you all every success in your future endeavors. And I hope that you continue to stay engaged and serving our Albany community. Thank you.
There's no other public comment.
Great. Well, I'm humbled and appreciative of that comment. I think I'm very proud of the work that we've done over the past year and a half or so, and think we've come to some logical conclusions, or at least thoroughly researched the two issues that we've been tasked to delve into. So thank you. The next item on our agenda is presentations. I don't think we have any presentations. So I'm going to move on to item number 6. The first item on here was follow-up from our prior meeting discussion regarding city council member wages. Actually, it looks like we still have a comment from the member of the public. Are we able to go back to that? I know we haven't really moved on to the next item.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Jeremiah, I was wondering when you were going to open the agenda item to speak on anything that's not on the agenda.
That's what this is right now.
Oh, okay, you never announced that this particular agenda item. You never said agenda number 5 or 4 or what agenda item is. You kind of went from the.
Sorry. Yeah, consider this public comment on any item that is not on the agenda.
Okay. All right. I think that was agenda item number 5, right?
4, yeah.
4. Okay. All right. Yeah, I just didn't hear you guys announce it. That's all. But you guys took public comment on something else but anyway, okay. So here we go. Can you start my 3 minutes? Can you start my 3 minutes, please? Okay, thanks. So, hi, my name is Jeremiah. I attended a couple of special city council meetings lately, and there was a lot of discussion about the city charter. A lot of discussion about the city charter. One of the topics was that, in fact, in the city charter, it says that city council members, the mayor is actually elected. I don't know if you're able to look at the city charter, but it says in there elected. It doesn't say appointed or voted on by council. It says the mayor of Albany is elected. And that's one of the topics of discussion with city council, because what's been happening is the mayor is not elected by the community, even though that's what it says in the charter. It says the mayor will be elected. It's kind of chosen within the city council. So I was wondering what's really going on here. If in the city charter it says that the mayor is supposed to be elected, why isn't the mayor elected by the citizens? And if that word needs to be changed from the mayor being elected, if that word needs to be changed to voted within city council or appointed within city council, I think that needs to be clarified for sure, because it's really misleading, as a public, and you see that in the city charter, it says that the mayor will be elected. Well, that gives the public the thought process that we get to elect the mayor. So is everything been going kind of in violation of the city charter? I think that needs to be reviewed, because that's very important. If it's worded in the charter that the mayor is elected, and that hasn't been happening, that's kind of an issue. So I just wanted to bring that to attention for clarification for sure. And there's also been talks about some things being changed in the charter regarding how to elect, how to appoint or elect a vacancy within the city council, as Mayor Janelle Gary resigned, how to fill that seat. I think it's 60 days now, and then there's a new application process. So I just want to bring that to light for review by this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. While you were speaking, I think Member Schneider might have been doing the same thing. I was looking into what I could find on the charter on a whim here. And it looks like the city code, I'm in section 2.01.
Yep.
I'm reading the council as it's elected in the prior paragraph. And as thus newly constituted shall then elect one of its members as its presiding officer, who shall have the title of mayor. The council shall also designate one of its members as vice mayor. So I'm actually interpreting this to be the status quo of the city electing the council members, and then the council electing one of its own members as the mayor. Member Schneider, did you see the same thing?
I'm
Yes.
sorry, guys. We got to stick to the agenda. It's not on the agenda.
Okay.
So as a point of procedure, if the member of the public who is bringing up an issue that's outside of our agenda wants to pursue that issue, is the right time to do that at the time when this committee is setting up its next work plan? like in early 2023, when we have meetings to discuss what items should go on the work plan, that's a time when our conversation is a little more open-ended and we can consider putting a topic like that on the work plan if we wanted to, right?
Possibly, I'd have to get back to you on that.
It actually does say on our agenda, by the way, that next meeting is January 19th, 2023. So I'm going to go ahead and presume that we will have that meeting, but we should consider if there's anything that we'd like to share after today, I think, back with the council or finalize for the next committee if that indeed does change. Okay, I'm going to move to item 6-1, which is discussion regarding city council member wages. And I think Member Thomas, you dug into this and some additional research since the rest of us had looked into it prior to a prior meeting. So is there, and I think you also had an attachment that you wanted to review. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Bowman. Appreciate it. I didn't rehash all the information that the other members had already researched in terms of, you know, what's the going rate and our rate versus other cities. One thing I did notice is when Chair Bowman mentioned San Antonio had elected to go to a salary from a very similar pay rate as Albany. It was like $1,040 per year. And then they did their own study similar to kind of what we may want to do, or at least have broader, I don't know, data, I guess, is the information that we don't seem to have specifically to cities of our same size. And then like within California, I think it would be more relevant than comparing ourselves to San Antonio. But in the, I don't know, Jonathan, can you just show that page, the chart that was presented in 2014, the San Antonio City Council, actually it was a University of Texas San Antonio did like a community discussion, and the students within, it was like a civic activity, and they discovered, or they were surprised by how little the city council members were being paid. So they did some research and found other cities of comparable size, and actually San Diego was of the same size as San Antonio. And you can see the mayor's salary is close to $100,000, and the city council members are like $75,000. And then they found other cities that are, obviously much bigger, and even in other smaller cities, comparable cities within the state of Texas, they were much less. There's another. I found another page with a little bit more data on it, but they, for instance, Austin was paying $81,000 for the mayor and $69,000 for the city council. Dallas pays $80,000. Council members are $60,000. The mayor gets $80,000. So Fort Worth, $29,000 for the mayor, $25,000 for council. And then, so San Antonio was the lowest out of all those cities. And in 2015, they amended their charter and raised the council member salary to $45,000 and $61,000 for the mayor. And it's for the same reasons. The support was to argue the lack of compensation for city council members restricts the candidates that can seek office to only those who are financially independent, preventing lots of great candidates from seeking office, inhibiting proper representation for lower economic classes, and creating a lack of low and middle class perspectives in city leadership. I did not find any additional studies since 2015 on whether the diversity increased. They probably collect demographic data. And that is what I was actually proposing as a recommendation, that we attempt to collect data not only on the candidates who apply to, who want to be on the council, on what their current economic or financial status is in terms of would they have to, quit their job or work part-time, or how would they basically fulfill the duties of city council and the impact it would have on their personal financial life. And then was it prohibitive, or was it going to add additional strain on their finances? And then two, I think there's an opportunity to put gather information from the general public, because not everyone will even apply thinking that I don't have time for this, I can't give up my career. But if they knew that a salary could be is something that the city would consider, would they consider applying for city council membership? Because it changes the game in terms of access and ability to support themselves financially while they're serving the public. So again, San Antonio went through this exercise looking at their peer cities within Texas themselves and put it out to ballot, and it was passed within a year that they should receive salary. And I'm sure they're seeing the benefits. I don't have any data to support that diversity changed. Again, I think if we want to make a change in Albany, we should consider collecting data on applicants through a survey process or a questionnaire that they have to fill out as part of the application process. And then similarly, we should put out something to the general public to actually get a feel for whether they're interested in, would apply or would consider city council membership if there was adequate compensation. And so those are my recommendations and thoughts. I'm done, Chairwoman.
No, I was just pausing to see if anyone wanted to comment.
Thank you.
I have some thoughts, but do you want to take public comment first or have discussion among us first?
I think it's on the agenda is discussion among us.
Okay. So I think those are great ideas, and I like the idea of collecting some more meaningful information about this question, because it seems like one of the reasons we've been stuck in our discussion about it is that it's been very hypothetical, not about whether we think the residents of Albany, the voting residents of Albany, would support this change, but about whether this change would make a difference, whether it would have the effect we intend it to have. And we've been looking for published research to answer that question. We haven't found anything. And I think the suggestion here is to use our own city and our own people to try to answer that question. And I like that idea as a way of moving forward with this.
Can I jump in, or are you still speaking?
I'm done.
Okay. About a survey, I think a survey that was just a simple, if we paid more, would you consider running, might need to be fleshed out with a broader inquiry into what do people know or perceive barriers to running for city council to be. Because again, we don't want to just
it's
gather
not a simple
information
question.
and
Yeah,
I'm still speaking.
I'm sorry.
And then you find ourselves paying the same people more. It's the same types of people more. Because I don't think we thoroughly understand what the barriers are to for a broad range of potential candidates to consider running for city council.
So I just want to clarify, is the suggestion that we survey members of the public, or I guess who's specifically might we be able to survey?
I don't know. I mean, a survey of, a broad survey of the public would be, it could be expensive. There could be logistical challenges. And so I think there would need to be a fair amount of thought given to exactly what do we want to ask to produce meaningful information.
And to how we disseminate the survey to make sure that that the people, we want to make sure it gets seen by that same group of people that are not currently running for office. That may be that people who are less likely to run for office for one reason or another are also less likely to respond to a survey depending on how it's presented or how it's distributed.
Member Thomas, I think you also had raised another potential idea of looking at those who have actually applied to run for office in the past, and if we had any demographic information on them. Is that right? I'm not sure if staff knows if any of that information is available. Like blinded, of course.
Is it okay? I do recall them saying that there was only one information was asked on the application was about I think it was Jonathan or that they asked a simple question about their line of business or their profession, and that was it on the current application.
Well, I believe that there is a pretty elaborate set of disclosure paperwork that candidates prepare and file. I'm not sure how much of that is made public, but there is a fairly substantial amount of paperwork that needs to be filed. And I didn't actually research this per se, but just socially, I was talking to a acquaintance who recently ran for city council in California, and she mentioned the paperwork as being rather daunting.
Right.
Do you know if that paperwork is filed by everyone who runs for city council or just people who are elected to city council?
This was to run. And she also mentioned that candidates who raise more than, I think it's $2,000 for their campaigns need to file additional paperwork. And this is just me talking to an acquaintance.
Yeah. Well, I have some knowledge about the paperwork for the campaign, but that doesn't impinge on the candidate's personal finances. That's about the campaign that raises more than $2,000 needs to file a collection of state state disclosure forms that have to do with where the campaign money is coming from and what the campaign money is being spent on. But that is decidedly separate from the personal financial situation of the.
I don't know. Go ahead, please.
But yes, I am a little bit familiar with the form where people who are taking office or perhaps even running for office need to disclose a lot about their personal finances.
Again, it may not be dollar amounts per se, but it may be for conflict of interest. You know, certain kinds of financial holdings might pose conflicts. But anyway, that's kind of I'm sort of going off in two different directions. One of them is that there is some data out there. I don't know how much it has to do with the actual dollar amount, but also the paperwork involved is a barrier for some people. So consider running for office.
Chair Bowman, can I expand a little bit more on?
Oh, sure.
Okay. So we know people ran and they didn't win. I think what we lack is, if we know from other studies, if there's a question about the type of people who are applying for Albany, I think there's an opportunity to validate simply just go back 5 years and send a survey to all the applicants that did and ask simple questions like household income, sole proprietor, self-employed, principal of a business, working part-time, salaried, and then if we were to and that would give us at least validation. Again, I think we should focus on Albany and what we want to do in this city in terms of promoting diversity and representation. So I think the best way to do it is through data as best possible. So we know there's a finite amount of candidates that did apply, and we can survey them and just get some information. It doesn't have to be a very sophisticated survey. I know this costs money and all. And then going forward, if we develop demographic information, I came up with just a draft question. If you became city council member, what impact would it have on your current employment status? No impact, minor impact. We'll have to reduce work hours or other, and then just please explain. So these as we gather data slowly, we as a community can make decisions about, are we promoting diversity? Are we getting enough candidates? And then if it's always the same for Albany, and then we know that we need to figure out if there's a change that needs to be made, and then put it out to the general public in terms of seeing if there's interest. What are the barriers? That was mentioned. What are the barriers that they are not applying? I don't think most people know that the reimbursement or the $300 stipend is all that's given. I was personally surprised by it myself. So there probably was an expectation that there was some sort of basic living salary if you're going to become to offset the time spent being city council member or mayor versus working full time. So anyway, that's all I have to say on this.
I think if we're going to pose the question in that survey of what impact would sitting on the council have on your employment, I like that question. Would it require you to reduce your working hours or change your employment or something like that? Maybe another variation on that question is, if the council pay were raised, what impact would the impact on your employment be different?
Yeah.
Like to ask these applicants to kind of answer a hypothetical, not only the hypothetical of how would your job be affected if you became a council member, but also counterfactually, how would your job situation be affected if you were to become a council member with higher pay? And see if people give a different answer, because it may be that people don't have much choice about, like, either they have a full-time job and they have to stay full-time, or they're retired and they're not working at all, and the difference of how much money they're making from their council position might not affect their work situation much at all. It's hard to know.
Right. I could do some additional follow-up with, maybe reach out to City of San Antonio to see if they have any data on whether after 2015, it's been 7 years. So they probably had two elections on their third now, probably. So, or the rotation. So maybe I can try to get some information for the January meeting and provide some supplemental info if I can speak to them directly.
I would just bear in mind that that city is much larger than Albany.
Right.
I guess I'm struck by the same thing. San Antonio is significantly larger. The data that Member Schneider shared in California suggested that Albany was within, summarizing my interpretation here, but within a fair standard deviation of most cities in the similar size range of 15,000 to 30,000. I can't remember exactly the details of what we looked at, potentially on the low side. And I know we were addressing wages or the stipend specifically, but the data set that we looked at also made us privy to other benefits. And when those were included, I think Albany was similar, if not higher, than the rest of the cities of similar size. I go back to maybe two questions in this discussion that have been pretty insightful to me, which would be, one, of the people that have run or filed the paperwork, do we have any publicly available data that you could look at? And of course, blind when we're interpreting it. But does it suggest that the average person that runs is much more well off than the average citizen in the city? And then two, the other question that I don't think we've specifically addressed is, does providing an increased salary or wage somehow encourage underrepresented or marginalized groups or lower income members of the city to run? Which I'm at a loss for how to answer. Like, I think the survey to me sounds challenging to practically implement and get to that answer. But open to ideas. It seems I ran short trying to find empirical data suggesting that increasing wages has done that. Maybe the city of San Antonio can help you out there. I found many qualitative statements from a professor in Texas as well. I think it was the University of Houston. But she also had stop short of finding anything empirical, which would be extremely convincing. But
Yeah.
until then, I guess I wasn't convinced that there was a significant issue.
I was coming to the same conclusion going through the Texas professor's article, and there was one footnote that really struck me, which was footnote 216 on pages 884 to 885. It's a continuing footnote. I am not aware of any empirical studies analyzing the relationship between legislative pay and diversity at the local level. And then she goes on to say, with regard, I don't know if it's a she or a he, sorry, this author goes on to say, with regard to economic diversity, one study found that higher salaries at the state legislative level may negatively affect the number of legislators from working class backgrounds. So I just don't think at least that we've been able to find so far, good empirical data showing not just the pay to diversity, but also pay to economic status. In other words, if you offer more pay, you definitely see a pattern of getting lower income people into running for office. And I agree with you. It's really hard to think about how to formulate survey questions. It's, are you someone who's working 2 jobs and you're sort of thinking about maybe running for office? And if you were paid enough so that you could drop one of your part-time jobs, would that make it possible for you to run? And otherwise you wouldn't? I mean, that's kind of a mouthful. And it's very hypothetical, and we just don't know if that's a real issue out there that is keeping people from running in Albany.
And even if we get the survey questions just right, the best we could hope for is a kind of a people's best guess of what they would do. Even if we got empirical data from a survey, it's not as good as empirical data saying that making this change would have this effect.
And
it's saying that,
observed.
Yeah, it's saying that that's what people said they would do if we made this change, but finding out what they would actually do if we made this change. So it may be that we are just, I like the Councilmember Thomas's ideas for how to beef up our data about this question somewhat. I don't think it gets us all the way there.
No.
And about surveying current or recent successful candidates, that would be a fairly small data set. And even if we promised we could blind it in some way, I can see that there would be qualms about supplying sensitive personal financial information.
Member Schmidt, are you referring to what I raised earlier in terms of looking at the filing paperwork of recent applicants?
If there's public information we can look at, that's great.
Maybe that's a question we can put to staff in terms of what available information is there around recent applicants that is public that we could use as a barometer of who is actually running. I'm not convinced that's going to get us the entire way there, but let's just say it was an abundance of folks that have run in the past decade or so, are well above the typical Albany resident, the means of the typical Albany resident, then that could be suggestive that or at least, I mean, it could be pretty suggestive that we at least have an applicant issue. Whether or not it's solved by raising the stipend is another question. And I guess I'm currently skeptical that it's at $300 a month now, the benchmark of similar cities, and the stipend alone wasn't all that much higher. Is the degree to which we even raise it to bring it in equilibrium with everybody else, is that going to be meaningful? I'm not sure. Certainly, I think if we raised it to the level of San Antonio now has, I think that might generate some interest, but I don't think that's in the budget.
Just to cut in what you were asking regarding candidate information, there is information on the website currently for current applicants or candidates. And then prior candidates, you'd need to submit a public records request.
Is that something that anyone on this committee wants to do?
Well, I'm just bringing up the page with election information. Statement of Economic Interest, Form 700. Is that the document we're talking about?
That's right.
Okay, so I'll just open one of those and at least see what the questions are on it. I'm not going to read, and it's public information on the website, but I'm not going to read people's answers. I'm just going to read to see what.
Maybe you could tell us what the questions are.
Oh,
the
only thing I see on the city website is the cover page. Is that correct? Or maybe for other candidates, I'll see more than the cover page. Oh yeah, this one, I have a couple pages. Okay, so it looks like it has a Schedule A, investments, Schedule B, real property, which would be, I guess, owning a home. Schedule C, income, loan, and business positions. Schedule D, gifts. Schedule E, travel payments. And the Schedule C, I'm looking at a Schedule C for one of the candidates. And it has questions like, what is your source of income, and is the income received in these different buckets? Is it between $500 and $1,000? Is it between $1,000 and $10,000? It's between $10,000 and $100,000, or is it over $100,000? So it's pretty broad.
Sorry, what were those ranges in reference to again?
Income from a particular source. So like, okay, let me look at the actual, and now I'm looking at the blank form that's on the FPPC website. So Schedule A, you describe your stocks and bonds and other interests. And again, there are these different buckets for what the value of each item reported is. And the buckets are this is for stocks and bonds. The buckets are 2,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to 1 million, or over 1 million. And then for income received, the bucket from a particular stock holding, the buckets are less than 500 or more than 500.
Or income received or income received?
Income received from I think this means like dividends from a stock holding or from a business partnership.
And is there a income from employment somewhere?
Yeah, there's a separate schedule for income from employment.
But this the same very broad ranges,
They're-
0 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to a million.
For the income from employment, the buckets are 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 100,000, or over 100,000.
Sounds like that could be somewhat telling. I know the buckets are broad, but let's just say everyone ended up in the last bucket. I don't think the 10 to 100 would be that telling. I don't know what the average per capita income of Albany is, or household income offhand. But unless it was definitive, everybody's in the same bucket, I think it could be hard to draw conclusions from that, but only telling if everybody was in the same top bucket or most were in the same top bucket. So I guess I'll ask again. Actually, I just Googled median household income, Albany, California, 103,000. So if everyone was in the top bucket, then everyone was above the median household income. So that could be somewhat telling. Is anyone interested in submitting a public records request here? I don't know that, again, it's going to answer everything that we need to answer, but it is one potential data point.
Should we figure out if we're going to be around first? I guess that could be an idea or a proposal for the next committee members if they want to take that on.
Yeah, we could note this discussion and that's an avenue for future information gathering for the next committee.
I mean, we could also create a memo. I probably would want to create a memo on the same topic for the next committee, or at least to report back to council. I know at least Mayor Jordan referenced he was looking forward to seeing some of the output of the not recommendations, but the research that we've been doing on the matters that we've been tasked with. I feel like we're in a good place. I know we haven't gotten to it yet, but with the memo on the voting age issue, should we create something similar for this issue with potential next steps? That could be one of the next steps.
I think it would be a short memo because we've done a lot of Googling, and what we found is Albany's current pay is the overall compensation is comparable to other cities of similar size, but we have not yet found, after fairly extensive research, good empirical data showing that cities of comparable size that raise their council pay by X amount see Y increase in economic or other diversity on their city councils. I just don't think we've seen anything like that.
I mean, if it's a short memo, I think it's a short memo, but don't we need to to share what we found with someone as resolution? Member Schneider, would you be willing to take the lead on drafting that summary?
Well, I can certainly draft a summary. would that, I'm just trying to think of the mechanics because I don't know that I would be around for another meeting. So would that be, you know, I could draft something quickly. Could that be added to this agenda for this meeting?
So I'm looking at our agenda for this meeting, and I'm under the impression that we are meeting on January 19th. It says next meeting Thursday, January 19th. It doesn't specify who is in attendance, but
Well, I could certainly draft something and send that to staff, and then, you know, we'll see what happens.
And that would be similar to what Member Bowman and I did with the other topic, where we worked as a subcommittee to draft a memo that is attached to tonight's the outcome of our work, primarily Kyle's work, but our subcommittee's work on this is attached to tonight's agenda. So if you did something similar, it could be attached to the next meeting agenda, whether you're there or not, right?
Okay. Well, I can certainly draft and send it to staff, and we'll hope for the best.
and I agree. It sounds like it's going to be much shorter, given what we found.
Or what we didn't find.
Yeah, given what we didn't find. I mean, Member Schneider found quite a bit of data. I know Member Thomas has done some research as well. So you could form a subcommittee if you wanted.
Just to confirm, we could attach that to the next agenda. If you drafted something and sent it, yes.
Okay.
Would Member Thomas like to work with Member Schneider as a subcommittee on drafting that memo, or are you both happy having Member Schneider do it as a solo project?
I think Member Schneider has a really good handle on it. I don't think I need to be part of it.
And then that it would certainly be, you know, reviewed in the next meeting. So, and feedback could happen at that time.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on this topic?
There's public comment.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and take the public comment, if that's okay, John?
Hey, it's Jeremiah here. Just for point of procedure, I always thought public comment came in between or after your questions, then it was public comment, and then back to discussion. So you guys kind of, I think, skipped over public comment and went straight to discussion. But anyway, besides that point of procedure, so I ran for city council myself, and yeah, I just want to say a few things here. The paperwork was daunting at first. It was overwhelming at first to see the paperwork. But once you sit down and read it for about 20 minutes and go over with the city clerk on what this paperwork's really asking, it really isn't difficult. It's pretty much straightforward. I don't remember anything about it asking how much money I made per year, you know, being a longshoreman. But it did ask what your job is. It asked what your career is. But I don't think I had to fill in how much money I make or submit any tax records or anything. Yeah, I believe you do have to report if you do spend over $2,000 for your campaign. I know I signed the Fair Campaign Practices, which is I can't spend more than $6,000 on the campaign. So if you do submit a public records request, you could review it all. I think 3 out of 4 members did sign Fair Campaign Practices, so you can't spend more than $6,000. But yes, anything you spend over 2,000 does have to be recorded. There was about 10 documents I had to sign, but it really wasn't that difficult. I mean, like I said, it was overwhelming at first to see this big old packet, but I believe about half of it I didn't need to do because it wasn't necessary. It didn't fall under things that was about me necessarily. You know, I haven't invested in any stocks. I don't own any property in Albany, so I didn't have to fill out that paperwork. Regarding the pay, I don't know, $300.
Oh, God.
We can't hear.
So if someone has a day job 9 to 5, they're not really missing work to be on a meeting at 7 o'clock unless they work nights. And I was wondering if you guys were going to discuss the light fare. Light fare is some sort of compensation if meetings start before or after 6. So I don't think you talked about light fare, but those are my.
Oh, that's it for public comment.
Thank you. Okay. Any point of discussion on the comment as it relates to the agenda item we just wrapped up?
Thank you. That was helpful.
Okay, I'm going to suggest we move to, and the light fare comment, I don't think was in the scope of our work plan for this year, although that we could certainly consider something like that for subsequent work plan. The other item on the agenda was the voting age issue. So Member Chomsky and I created a memo on this topic. It was attached to the agenda, but I can go ahead and share my screen now. And what we can do for our discussion in the last meeting is edit anything live, if desired, in this memo. So it essentially starts with what was in our work plan around the item when it was recommended for study by the Charter Review Committee and then it was approved by the City Council, and states that we evaluated the merits of amending the city charter by public referendum to lower the voting age to 16 for school board voting and or city council voting. The outputs here are we created a pros and cons analysis and identified local precedent. This is a verbiage I added here around the council or the committee recommends awaiting the full assessment of feasibility and implementation for already approved initiatives in Berkeley and Oakland, given that Albany is reliant on the same mechanisms, and that will provide us with cost and complexity pieces of the puzzle that we're currently missing now in order to accurately assess the pros and cons, essentially before putting the question up before Albany voters. And then what follows is the pros and cons, and I'll get into those in a second. But I'll pause here, see if there's any comments on the summary.
So when we say CRC recommends, do we need to have a motion to that effect and vote on it? Or is that something that we can just say as a kind of summary of the consensus from our past discussion? I think that's a question for staff.
That I'm not entirely sure on. I'd have to get back to you on that.
I mean, we could certainly go through the body of the document here, and we can have a motion to recommend or agreement with that statement. And I know we only have 4 committee members present, but we could document that. I actually saw something similar. It was on the other issue. I think a city in Oregon had a similar body that was determining what they should do with city council pay. And there were like 4 different recommendations that the body came up with, and a different number of committee members that supported each. But one rose to the top and had like 9, and the next one had 3, and then there was 2 recommendations with 1. So maybe we could do something similar.
So we could take, after you go through this document, we could take a vote on the particular recommendation that you wrote down there. And we could also take a vote on approving the document as a whole. Does that seem like a good procedure?
And I'm comfortable with that as long as there's no objection from staff.
No, and yes, you could make a motion to recommend to council after reviewing the memo or whichever report. Yes.
And I don't think we're talking about a recommendation to council at this point, are we? This is just an internal document summarizing our thinking at this time.
Well, that's a question I had based off of Mayor Jordan's comments at the meeting that I attended. It sounded like he was looking forward to seeing like output or recommendations from the committee. So let's say we don't meet in January. I'm wondering when that would happen. When do they see the summary of the body of work that we've engaged in? And this memo could go to both subsequent charter review committee and or back to the city council to say, this is what the CRC did over the last 2 years. Does that make sense?
If this document were to be presented to city council, I would recommend, I think, one tweak in this paragraph where your cursor is flashing. So I think what we're recommending doing is awaiting the full assessment of feasibility and implementation, et cetera, before making a report with a recommendation to the city council, because that is a big step between the work this committee does and putting the question before Albany voters. Does that make sense to you all? You agree with that tweak?
I mean, that I'll speak for myself. I think that is definitely what I intended, but I like the wordsmithing there to make that entirely clear.
Yeah. So can you add a comma after city council and also remove the last 8 words or so before putting the question? Member Schneider, is that
I think that's
what you had in mind?
Yeah, that is good.
Okay. Any other comments on this first page? Okay. So the next section here basically outlines precedent. So identified similar initiatives that passed, most relevant of which passed in Berkeley and Oakland, Y1 and QQ in 2016 and 2020, respectively, with the percentage of the vote. Those were specific to the school board. There are 4 cities in Maryland that have passed similar youth voting initiatives. Maryland state law specifically allows cities to lower the voting age through a city council vote. So that's how those were passed. They weren't put to public referendum, to my knowledge. And each of those cities have actually implemented 16-year-olds voting in all local elections. Cities are listed out here with their population, some of which are similar to Albany in size. There was one city, however, that did the same thing in 2016, but then a subsequent city council reversed it. I couldn't find much detail aside from a statement suggesting the city council it just turned over and the new city council had different perspective. Not potentially that it was in reaction to anything that had happened. I mean, it also was only a year later. Number of countries, or at least states within countries, in the case of Germany, that have lowered the voting age to 16 for most elections. And then a note here that in Berkeley and Oakland, the Alameda County Registrar of Voters has not yet found a way to resource and implement the required changes. So it's the section on precedent. So pros here identified 4. The first was around increased civic engagement. There was research on turnout, at least in Tacoma Park, the first city to do this, 16 and 17-year-old turnout exceeded that of all the other age groups. There were studies suggesting that younger voting increases the likelihood of voting in the next election, and that type of behavior is habit forming. And then also some research in Denmark that suggested basically that 18-year-olds were far more likely to vote than 19-year-olds, and every month of extra age made someone less likely to turn out for their first election. And the takeaway here was just enfranchise them as soon as possible, and that makes them more likely to vote. And some anecdotes from that article also suggested that when folks are entrenched in the home and in the community at younger ages versus 19, which tends to be a more transitory age with people working and going to university, they're more likely to vote. Impact of the issues. There's qualitative suggestions that young citizens are affected by the issues that they're voting on here because they pay income taxes, work, donate blood, or subject to the law, etc. Some research on cognitive ability suggesting 16-year-olds have similar cognitive capacity as 18-year-olds with respect to at least unhurried logical reasoning. And then a number of articles suggesting the benefits are substantial and the risks don't seem that high. And I identified a number of documented support for the issue that seemed relevant to Albany, with the Speaker of the House, or current Speaker of the House, our U.S. representative, the California Senate representative, and then the mayor of neighboring city. Cons, big one here, the unknown is the cost and complexity. So a separate follow-up section on that specifically. Inconsistency with other milestones, I think that should say, because typically 18 is associated with becoming an adult. You're still in potentially high school. You're not yet able to serve in the military. You can't smoke. You can't drink. There's a lot of milestones that come with 18, and voting could be one of those. Turnout among young voters as a whole block, or at least 18 to 29 group, is consistently lower than other age groups. lack of developmental maturity. So this is a rebuttal to the previous statement on cognitive ability, but the cortex is still developing until the age of 25. And then there was some litigation that came up when I had reached out to the attorney working with the city of Berkeley, or working with the Berkeley school district, that San Francisco's similar but yet different policy around allowing non-citizens to vote for school board has been challenged in litigation on language in the state constitution. And they were paying attention to that because similar logic might be applied to this case. I think that ruling, there was an initial ruling by a court overturning or putting on hold San Francisco's initiative or policy, but that's since been appealed, and I think it's still pending. And then lastly, I think Member Schneider, you've raised this a few times. It's unclear if there's actually interest in Albany in making this happen, or if we're just creating, if we're just passing this issue just on a whim. We don't have evidence that there's community interest here. So I have a section on how we might potentially gauge that if the pros and cons assessment comes back satisfactory. If I may, I'll just complete this and take any comments at the end. The cost and operational assessment, number of costs that were outlined in the effort in Albany and Berkeley regarding creating and referencing separate voter databases for those under 18, managing a separate ballot and voter pool, and potential labor involved in working through this. There's also manual processes that might need to happen in lieu of system updates, or they could be interim manual processes. And then some complexity involving outreach to non-adults, because if a 16 or 17-year-old's ballot gets lost, there are some questions about who can they legally contact and that sort of thing. And potential need for Secretary of State approvals on some of the changes to the system and voter databases. The Berkeley initiative authorized the 16-year-old voting pending it doesn't result in increased election costs to the city of Berkeley. The funding would fall to the school district. The Oakland initiative, however, was city funded, and the county registrar's election software partner, Runbeck, will develop a cost estimate, which will ultimately be reviewed by the cities and the school district or the Alameda Board of Supervisors, because the Alameda Board of Supervisors could choose to fund this themselves. There were 3 different types of costs to consider: upfront costs to upgrade the county-wide election system, upfront costs that could be specific to Albany, and then ongoing recurring costs that the council may want to consider. And then as far as gauging community interest, the Albany School Board offered to engage their student members to reach out to other students within the school district to evaluate whether or not there's interest in this. And then finally, I included the contact information for the attorney that I was in contact with that's working with Berkeley and Oakland school districts. And then some references. I know that was quite a bit, but any comments on any of the individual items here, disagreements, or things that we might want to clarify?
I think this is great. It's just a really helpful recap of all the work that has been done. There is one thing we may want to add, and I'm not sure what category it belongs in. It may just be an unknown or further work to be done at some point. And that is whether Section 6.01 of the charter, as it's currently written, would prevent Board of Elections from departing from city council elections in this respect in the age of voters? In other words, would that get in the way of a change that would just impact the Board of Elections? And if so, would amending the section, is there a way to amend the section such that it does not cause unintended or negative consequences? You know, maybe it's a quick fix. Maybe it requires more thought.
Would you consider this a legal question?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm potentially adding it here in the other section. Would it be necessary to amend, what was the section?
Section 6.01
of the city charter to enable such voting. I guess that we should probably say what that section states that you were referring to.
Right now, let me pull it up just so you're all aware about what it actually says. And again, this is in the scenario where we make the change for the Board of Elections, but not for City Council. And the section itself, it's 16.01A, which says, in pertinent part, the control of the school department shall be vested in a Board of Education, elected at large by the qualified voters of the city at a general municipal election, ... in the same manner and time as for members of the council. And so it's that in the same manner language that might require a change. And, we would need, I think, legal advice about whether it's an easy fix or not.
And if this is in the charter, perhaps it could be included in a referendum on the topic, and you kill two birds with one stone.
Exactly. Any change in the charter would have to go before the voters.
Yeah,
is that an appropriate summary? Sorry.
I think the reason that our committee is considering this is that to make this possible would require a change to the charter, which would require a ballot measure to be voted on by people in Albany. And so I think this question is really just about which specific statements in the charter would need to be amended. We know that we're talking about a charter amendment here, right? So I'm not sure that this needs to go in the document, because it seems to me that the whole point of this discussion is to talk about changing the charter. We haven't gotten into details about which specific paragraphs of the charter we would be changing, but it seems like this one that you've brought up is one that would have to be changed by the amendment. But that's a matter that comes into consideration when we're writing the amendment for the ballot, which seems to me like it's a later stage of the discussion. So I guess I would prefer not to go into this much detail at this stage of the discussion, but I'll let the other committee members have their say on that too.
I mean, I don't know if you were following, but I made some wordsmithing suggestions here, just adding a consideration. It might be necessary to specifically amend an existing section of the charter rather than just adding something new. In my mind, I see both points. I think that it was pertinent to raise the issue, but I also think that bridge would be crossed when we get to it. I don't see significant. It could go either way, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Keeping it in or taking it out.
Yeah. I'd prefer to take it out, but I don't have a strong opinion. So
I don't have a strong opinion either.
I think
It is
if
something that would have to be looked at. It's part of the work that would need to be done.
Yeah, I guess I'd prefer to put in a more general statement about to say if this is going to be done, it would be necessary to study the charter and figure out exactly what needs to be changed to implement it. For instance,
what about, for example, and we include that as an example. And so if this change was recommended, we would need to study what would need to change in the charter itself. For example, it might be necessary to amend this.
Yeah, language. And then that sentence could be a lot shorter. It could just say, for example, section 6.01A of the charter states that.
Does that work?
Yeah, you could take out, it might be necessary to also amend.
Oh, thank you. Love the deletions of extra
and
words.
Take out the comma after charter.
The period, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that works.
Okay. Any other comments on pros and cons or the body of
I had
analysis?
one very small point. There was a place where you made reference to the Board of Supervisors, and I think it was on page 3. There, it's right at the bottom of the screen now. Alameda County Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, good clarification.
Thanks.
Any other comments? So my suggestion here is we vote on the language here to recommend awaiting the full assessment, including the feasibility in Berkeley and Oakland. So first I'll submit a motion for that, and then
before you submit any motions, I think we should take public comment.
Oh, sorry, didn't realize there was public comment, but agree.
Yeah, hi committee. This is Jeremiah. It's a very important thing. I'm really glad this made the agenda. I'm so happy this made the agenda, and I'm really excited that we're all discussing this tonight. It's a very important topic. I know it's been raised in the past many times before, and I feel like we're getting somewhere. I just want to say thank you for doing all this research you've done. To me, it's more than adequate. You've outdone yourselves in all this research. You really have, and I just want to say thank you. I just want to support the voting age. One second. I just want to support reducing the voting age to 16. And I would say that if you turn 16 on November 8th, then you qualify. If you turn 16 November 9th, I just don't think you made the cut, right? So within the policy, the written policy, I hope it clarifies, you know, that if your birthday is November 8th or sooner, you can vote. But if your birthday is November 9th, it may be too late. But also, just to let everybody know, absentee ballots are able to be mailed in 7 business days after the elections, after November 8th, excluding holidays. So 7 business days, excluding holidays, after November 8th is actually tomorrow. So not counting the weekends, not counting this past Veterans Day, 7 business days after November 8th is actually tomorrow. So there's still people allowed to mail in their absentee ballot tomorrow. And then it takes another 3 to 5 business days for that to cycle through the mail, maybe another couple days for it actually to be counted. So just want to let you know, if you want to do your research on absentee ballots, it's an additional 7 business days. So maybe including in that birth date, it could be, if your birth date is November, you know, such and such past absentee days qualified, you know, you're still included. I just think it's great because it encourages younger voters. It encourages more of the community to be involved. And yes, these policies that might be implemented will take an effect when they're 18, when people are in office. So thank you for researching.
Thank you for the commentary and considerations.
Can I just make a general recommendation to members of the public that if you want to find out what the rules are about the election that's currently underway, please look it up from a reliable source.
I was going to make a motion first to approve the language in the document, and then second, we can discuss who it goes to. So I'll make a motion to approve the language, including the recommendation language about awaiting the full assessment of feasibility in Berkeley and Oakland before providing a final recommendation.
I second that.
Member Chomsky,
Yes.
Member Schneider,
Yes.
Member Thomas, Member Thomas?
Yes,
Oh, sorry.
that was me.
And Chair Bowman.
Yes.
All right. A motion carries.
Okay. And then the second motion I can make is to share this memo with both the city council and the next committee, the next charter review committee, should there be one.
I'll second that.
Member Chomsky,
Yes.
Member Schneider,
Yes.
Member Thomas,
Yes,
and Chair Bowman.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Is there any other comments on this agenda item?
I just want to thank Chair Bowman for the incredible work that he did preparing this memo. We were a subcommittee, and I added maybe 2 or 3 sentences here or there, but it was really a big chunk of work that Chair Bowman did, and I really appreciate it.
And I second that.
Thank you both. With that, is there any other commentary on the two work items that we had on the agenda? If not, I'll move to item number 7, future agenda items. Should we have another meeting? I know we have a potential memo to review from Member Schneider. Should we end up meeting in January? Anything else?
So should we assume that youth voting will likely not be on the agenda for the hypothetical January meeting?
Maybe we want to add any
If anybody has any.
response or questions from City Council in response to our memo. So one item, review Member Schneider's memo on City Council compensation. And second item being review any commentary or reaction from City Council in response to the other memo. Anything else?
Sounds reasonable.
Okay. With that, our next meeting is potentially Thursday, January 19th at 7 p.m. I assume staff will keep us in the loop in terms of whether or not that's happening. And I think we can go ahead and adjourn.